published by Portal Games and designed by Ignacy Trzewiczek, is a card game where you are settling civilizations. It's a 4-player card game, and each player has their own little civilization. Each one has different engine-like goals, so each one plays pretty differently, which is a great thing for replayability, because if you learn like the barbarians really well and your friends are like, you can't play barbarians anymore because you always win, then you switch to another faction. Pretty convenient. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You have your own faction deck, which has cards which are unique to your faction and do unique little cool things for the engine that your faction should be like basically optimally trying to achieve. You don't have to achieve that engine to win victory, yes. There are 3 types of cards in the game, and they're both in the common deck and your faction deck, and those types would be production, features, and actions. Basically, all of these cards help you get the goods that you need to build more cards, which will help you get points, because the whole point of the game is to have the most points by the end of the game. Common buildings will give you 1 point at the end of the game, and all faction buildings will give you 2 points. There's also ways that you can get points during the game, usually through like actions or like production or just things. So yeah, in Imperial Settlers, you're just building your own little civilizations, and you're building your own little buildings, and you're building a gold mine, and you're building like factories, and you're building like all this cool little stuff. And you say, that's awesome, Tiffany, but where's the player interaction? The primary player interaction is the raise ability. So in the game, you get little swords, and if you have 2 of those swords, you can use those 2 swords to raise one of your opponent's buildings that has like a raise to get thing. So if you really need fruit and you can't produce fruit, but like your buddy over there is like got a building that you can raise to get fruit, you could just be like, and knock it out and get the fruit. Of course, that kind of messes up the opponent, which might be also why you did it, but they do get like a little bonus from that, because they'll get a little piece of wood that they can use to do buildings. Like basically they salvage the wood from the burned remains of the building you raised, and they can use the foundation of that building to build faction buildings. You can also raise cards out of your own hand to gain the benefits, and that only will cost you 1 sword. The other way that players can interact with each other is some factions have, well actually I think most of them have 1 or 2 cards that'll affect an opponent's building. So if you are, for example, the Romans, you have a card that as an action, you can just like destroy and remove somebody's card from the game entirely. They don't even get to use it as a foundation. Imperial Settlers is a fantastic card-based engine building game that isn't a deck builder like a lot of the engine builders out there. It's also not worker placement, because what you're doing, while you do have workers, you're not really placing them, though sometimes you place them on actions, but that's a whole other thing. You're actually focusing on getting the resources you need to build the buildings that you need to do things so that you can build more buildings that will eventually get you points. The first round of the game is usually pretty quick and it's over because people can only do a small number of things. But once you get to about midway of the game, we're at like round 3, round 4, like a lot of things are happening every turn. And round 5, you just have even more stuff happening. Like round 5, I feel takes just as long as round 1 and 2 combined. Because of this, I feel you can really ease people into the engine building aspect of this game, because the first part of the game is really straightforward and simple. And so even if they're not familiar with engine building, it's a great introduction, because it's like, oh, well, if I do this, 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 then I can do this. And then every round, they'll have more and more options, the more buildings that they build, and they'll be able to see and connect and do different things. Then once they understand that faction, like I said, they can switch to a different faction. Imperial Settlers is in my opinion, fantastic engine building game. It's crunchy enough for folks that like crunch, but it's not too crunchy at the beginning so that people that aren't so into that or maybe haven't discovered engine building yet will be lost. It grows really nicely with the player throughout the game, and I think it has a lot of replayability value just in that the fact that there's 4 factions, and he's released an expansion pack that introduces new cards and will allow you to make a custom faction, but basically picking and choosing cards from other factions. So yeah, maybe sometimes your friends are in the mood to settle for something, and I would recommend that when you're in the mood to settle and your friends are in the mood to settle, you reach for Imperial Settlers. Maybe not that other game. Oh, nice save! Actually, that's